It was 3:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, and neither had the grinding in my head. The harsh blue light of the monitor was burning my eyes. I was staring at my bank account screen. The numbers staring back at me were not just low. They were an insult, a mathematical proof of my own slavery. In exactly 3 hours and 46 minutes, my alarm clock would ring. I would drag myself out of bed, put on a cheap suit that didn't quite fit, drive through miserable, soul-crushing traffic, and sit in a gray cubicle. I would spend the best hours of my day generating wealth for a man who did not even know my last name. I was doing everything society commanded me to do. I followed the script perfectly. I went to school, I got the degree, I swallowed my pride. I worked the overtime. I was, by all metrics, a good employee. But the math was not making sense. The harder I worked, the more trapped I felt. The more I sacrificed, the less I had. I was bleeding time, the only non-renewable resource in the universe, and I had nothing to show for it. I was a ghost in my own life, waiting for a retirement I would probably be too sick to enjoy. That was the night I stopped believing in the system, and that was the night I found it. I was mindlessly scrolling through an old, deeply buried forum on the dark web. I was looking for freelance coding gigs. I was looking for a miracle. I was looking for a way out. Then I noticed a thread that had been locked for years. There was no user profile attached to it, no comments, just a single encrypted file sitting in the dark. The title read, "The Architect's Logs." I downloaded it. It was a digital journal, hundreds of pages of pure, unadulterated financial philosophy. But it was not written by a motivational speaker. It was not written by a college professor. It was written by a predator, a mastermind who had completely disconnected himself from the matrix of normal society. The first page had only one sentence, written in stark white letters against a pitch-black background. It read, "If you are reading this, you are functioning as a battery for someone else's machine, but you do not have to be." I couldn't breathe. It felt like the screen was looking directly at me. It felt like the text was reading my mind. I leaned in closer. My hands were actually shaking. I turned to the first log. Log entry number 1, the bleeding neck. The journal began with a brutal deconstruction of why 99% of men fail to escape the matrix. The architect wrote, "Look at the fools trying to build businesses. They spend their life savings trying to sell vitamins. They create apps that remind people to drink water. They sell fitness programs to people who kind of want to lose a few pounds. They build minor conveniences. They sell things that make people feel slightly better. Vitamins are a luxury," the text continued. "When the economy crashes, when inflation hits, what is the first thing people stop buying? Vitamins. The amateur relies on convincing people they need his product. He begs for their attention. He runs advertisements trying to persuade the masses to care. It is a pathetic, exhausting way to operate." I stared at the glowing words. Every business idea I ever had, every side hustle I tried to start over the years, they were all vitamins. I was trying to be innovative. The architect despised innovation. He preferred extraction. "The elite 1% do not sell vitamins," the log stated. "We sell painkillers. We do not invent desires. We locate existing desperation. We look for the bleeding neck." Imagine a man walking down the street in broad daylight. If you try to sell him a multivitamin, you have to stop him, pitch to him, fight his objections, and convince him. But imagine a man staggering down a dark alley with a severed artery in his neck. He is bleeding out. He is terrified. He knows his time is running out. If you stand in front of him holding a tourniquet and a bandage, do you need to convince him? Do you need to run a marketing campaign? No. He will empty his pockets. He will give you the keys to his house. He will surrender everything he owns just to stop the pain. This is the foundation of the wealth extraction system. You must find a group of people who are in excruciating, immediate pain. Not physical pain, psychological pain, emotional agony. Find the men who are losing their hair and their confidence. Find the people drowning in debt, terrified of losing their homes. Find the lonely, the insecure, the desperate. When a man has a bleeding neck, price becomes irrelevant. He does not ask for a discount on his own salvation. I sat back in my chair. The rain continued to hit the window, but the room felt entirely different. The fog in my brain was gone. For 28 years, I had been looking at money the wrong way. I didn't need a better product. I needed to find a deeper wound. I kept reading. My eyes were burning, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. The architect's log continued, moving from theory into brutal, mechanical execution. How do you find the bleeding neck? The text read. You do not look at products. You look at confessions. The amateur searches for keywords like best shoes or cheap electronics. The elite mastermind searches for keywords of despair. Go into the dark corners of the internet, the forums where anonymous people hide. Search for phrases like, I can't take it anymore. My wife is leaving me. I hate looking in the mirror. I am drowning in debt. This is where you find the raw, unfiltered agony of the market. People lie in public. They lie on social media. They put on a mask of success, flashing fake smiles and rented cars. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, bathed in the glow of a smartphone screen, under the cloak of a fake username, they tell the absolute truth. They bleed out onto the keyboard. Your job is not to judge them. Your job is not to pity them. Your job is to observe the wound. You must measure its depth. You must understand their fear better than they understand it themselves. The average salesman tries to push a product. The architect reflects the customer's pain back to them so accurately that they feel understood for the very first time in their lives. When you can articulate a man's agony better than he can, his brain automatically assumes you have the cure. He will hand you his wallet without you ever asking for it. I realized exactly what he was teaching me. This wasn't marketing. This was psychological profiling. It was the exact same technique a predator uses to study the herd. You don't look at the strongest animal. You look for the limp. You look for the vulnerability. Except in this game, we weren't hunting them to destroy them. We were hunting them to sell them the illusion of salvation. I opened a new tab on my browser. For the first time in my life, I wasn't mindlessly consuming content. I was scanning the matrix. I started searching, not for ways to make money, but for people who were losing theirs. I bypassed the mainstream websites. I dug into obscure Reddit threads, specialized forums, and locked groups. I read the words of men terrified of going bankrupt. I read the panic posts of business owners who couldn't get clients. I saw the bleeding necks everywhere. Society was not a functioning machine. It was a giant hospital waiting room, and everyone was in pain. By 5:30 a.m., The sky outside my window began to turn a sickly gray. I found it. I found a specific group of people, tens of thousands of them, suffering from the exact same problem. A problem they were too embarrassed to talk about in real life, but desperate enough to pay anything to fix. They were bleeding, and I knew exactly what bandage they needed. My alarm rang. It was time to go to work. I stood up, put on my cheap suit, and looked in the mirror. I was still going to the same miserable job, but the man staring back at me was different. The employee was dead. The architect was awake. End of log 01. If you are listening to this and you are ready to find the bleeding neck, type "I am the hunter" in the comments. Subscribe to Tedu OS. The logs will continue.